I'm Mark, 31, and I've been married for 3 years to Lisa, 30. She's in the advertising industry, and I work as an executive at a multinational corporation. I met Lisa on a dating app, and after a couple of years of an on and off relationship, we finally decided to tie the knot. We both respect each other, but we're more of a mature couple who keeps boundaries and doesn't get too lovey-dovey. Lisa is a creative developer for advertising, which means she has odd and unorganized working hours. I was accommodating for the last 3 years, but lately something felt off. I tried having an open-hearted conversation with Lisa, but she brushed me off, saying I was just overthinking. Last year, my nephew Jake, 25, graduated from a cinematography course and wanted a job. Since Lisa was in the advertising industry, he asked her for a referral. Her agency wasn't hiring cinematographers at the time, so she tried to refer him to other agencies where her friends and acquaintances worked. A few months later, the hiring manager at Lisa's agency spotted Jake's work and offered him better pay. When Lisa found out Jake got an offer at her agency, she advised against joining, stating he shouldn't switch jobs within months and that her agency wasn't great. It had a toxic work culture and all that. Oddly enough, Lisa had never complained about her workplace being toxic before. She had been with that agency for years, and her sudden advice raised suspicion in Jake's mind. Although he didn't say anything, it was clear from his expression that he didn't buy her logic. After Jake left, I asked Lisa why she was so reluctant to let him join her agency. She said the agency wasn't good for cameramen because the advertising director was a toxic boss. I questioned her, asking why she had worked there for so long without ever mentioning any toxicity. She said her line of reporting was different. She reported to a creative head who wasn't toxic, but her friends had told her the advertising director was a cruel man. The next day, I called Jake and tried to give him the same reason Lisa had given me. He said he hadn't decided yet and was still considering the offer. He mentioned checking up on the information online from previous employees. I left the conversation there and didn't follow up with Jake again for weeks. A couple of months later, Lisa came home with an angry face. I asked her what was wrong, but she ignored me and went straight to the shower. I thought maybe it was work-related stress and didn't think too much about it. After her shower, she went straight to bed without having dinner. I tried to cuddle her and asked why she was upset, convincing her to have dinner, but she refused, saying she was tired and just wanted to sleep. I backed off, giving her space because after a hectic work shift, sometimes sleep is more important than food or a husband. The next morning, she was back to normal and didn't say anything about the previous night. I decided to ignore it to avoid making her angry. She came home late that evening, and I assumed it was due to her usual shift extension. But she was fuming and didn't wait for me to ask why. She unleashed her temper on me. Apparently, she was angry because Jake ignored her advice and joined her agency. She went on to say that no one in my family loves or respects her opinion. I was dumbfounded by her reaction. It wasn't a big deal if Jake didn't take her advice. He's an adult and has the right to choose his employers. Lisa has always been strong-headed, and I adore her for her strong personality. It's because of her personality that she has thrived in a male-dominated career. However, sometimes Lisa gets egotistic. Early in our dating phase, I struggled with her stubbornness because she would often put her foot down and refuse to budge from her decisions. But over time, I realized she was smart and intuitive. Her decisions and predictions were usually spot on. So now, I'm conditioned to go by her instincts, even if she can't always back her points with logic. When Lisa unloaded her anger on me, I didn't flare up. It would have triggered her more. After she was done, I calmed her down. I assured her I believed in her judgment completely, but we can't force our family to do the same. I told her she tried her best to stop Jake from jumping into the fire, but if he still chose that path, let it be. Let him learn the hard way. To satisfy her ego, I told her she would have the last laugh. Of course, I didn't want my nephew to suffer, but he had to bear the consequences of his decisions. Besides, he wasn't bound to stay there forever. He could leave whenever he wanted. Lisa remained quiet while I pacified her. I couldn't tell if she was convinced, so I decided to let it pass. It's been more than 3 months since then, and Lisa has been behaving weirdly. She gives me the cold shoulder every now and then. Some days she's normal, and other days she feels like a stranger. I've tried confronting her several times, but she brushes off her behavior as a result of hectic work and insists I'm just overthinking. I asked her if she was still upset about Jake's incident, but she said he didn't exist for her. I know her remarks are rude, but I also know they're temporary. She'll be fine after a while. I haven't spoken to Jake since he joined the agency, but I guess he's fine since he hasn't quit yet. I'm more concerned about Lisa's behavior toward me. Sometimes I feel her coldness is related to Jake ignoring her advice, that she doesn't feel valued. Other times, I feel it's something else entirely. I don't know how to get out of this. Initially, I thought she was hiding something at work and didn't want Jake to find out, and subsequently didn't want me finding out either. Update 1. Hi, I let that phase pass on its own. I focused on my work, joined a gym, and took up the goal of losing 10 pounds. But I guess Jake had something in store for me. Last week was Jake's birthday. Honestly, I don't remember anyone's birthday except for Lisa's and our anniversary. I wouldn't have realized it if I hadn't seen it on social media. So I called up Jake to wish him. He sounded cheerful, but when I asked about his work, he got quiet and said he wanted to meet me. He said he had taken the day off and wanted to have lunch with me. It took me by surprise because a 25-year-old definitely doesn't want to have lunch on their birthday with their uncle unless it's serious business. I asked him if everything was okay at work because I trusted Lisa and thought Jake's boss might actually be toxic. I thought Jake had realized he shouldn't have ignored Lisa, so I agreed to meet up. I had to fake being sick to take a sudden day off, but I was curious to know what Jake had to say. During lunch, Jake was uncomfortable most of the time. I asked if anything was bothering him, but he said no. I even asked about his boss and work pressure, but he said work was going great. His strange behavior made me uncomfortable, so I bluntly asked if he wanted to share anything with me. He was caught off guard and admitted he had something on his mind. He told me he had seen Lisa being unusually close to her boss, the creative head. They always had lunch and coffee breaks together, and she often left early with him. It had become a topic of office gossip, and it troubled him to hear such filthy words against her. Since everyone in the office knows that Jake is my nephew, they don't gossip about Lisa in front of him. But you know how these things spread quickly. I asked Jake if he was sure about it. He clenched his palms and apologized to me at least 100 times, saying he was sorry to tell me all this. He initially hesitated to get into details, afraid of hurting me. He revealed the details only when I insisted. He added that it could be a mere rumor because they too have to accompany their boss during client meetings. So it could be possible that Lisa was leaving the office for client meetings. I was heavy-hearted and unable to process the information. My problem was that Jake wasn't sure about it. It could be mere speculation and baseless gossip. Besides, I had no evidence to confront Lisa, making my situation more suffocating. I went back home feeling disoriented. I was by myself the entire evening and even at the dinner table. I buried my head in the plate and nibbled on my food. Lisa asked me a few times if I was okay, but I just nodded. Unable to sleep, I tucked myself under the blanket, feeling frigid. I don't know what came over me when I suddenly asked Lisa, "What was the exact reason you didn't want Jake to join your agency?" She was taken aback and asked why I was bringing up the topic again. I told her with a straight face that I met Jake today, and he was happy with his work as well as his boss. Lisa rolled her eyes, put down her phone, took a long breath, and said, "Look, you know my intentions were not wrong. I'm not sure how he's getting along with his boss. Maybe they both share the same ideology." I asked her what she meant by the same ideology. Hesitantly, she told me that she found Jake to have a conservative mindset, the kind that raises an eyebrow when a woman's skirt is short or the neckline is low. She said Jake's boss was almost a chauvinist who looked down on women in the team. She claimed Jake was nosy and liked to dictate the women in his house, so she wasn't comfortable with him working at her agency. I asked her why she didn't tell me this before. She said it would have hurt me and wasn't necessary to indulge in such details. I didn't say a word after that. In retrospect, I realized she was somewhat right. I had often heard Jake telling my sister she was too old to wear fashionable clothes or bright lipstick. He was also against his sister's decision to move out of the house to live by herself. He once even thrashed a boy for talking to his sister cozily in the school cafeteria. So I'm a little unsure about making any judgments here. Although I trust Lisa, I don't want to end up blindsided and fooled. Whatever it may be, I can't completely dismiss Jake's instincts this time. I would appreciate any solid advice. Thanks a lot. Update 2. Thanks for the really good advice. As part of this community, I asked Jake to gather some proof regarding his claim. He said he didn't want to be involved in this saga and be labeled as a marriage breaker by the family. I assured him I wouldn't accuse him, even if his suspicions turned out to be false. And if what he said turned out to be true, what better could he do for me than to expose a cheating relationship? He finally agreed to give it a shot. He said he would try to get some evidence but couldn't promise anything. A few days later, Lisa came home and started throwing tantrums at me. She accused me of using Jake to spy on her, saying he had made her life terrible at work and she wouldn't tolerate it. She threatened Jake with his job if he continued to spy on her. I urged her to tell me the exact reason for her reaction. She counterattacked, saying I shouldn't act naive when I was the one plotting all this, using Jake's help. I felt terrible about lying to her, but assured her I wasn't involved in any of this. She said Jake had been keeping an eye on her wherever she went, whether it was the cafeteria or the terrace for a smoke break. At that moment, I realized Jake's foolishness. What was he thinking, following her everywhere? Even if she was up to something, she wouldn't do it in public, right? At that moment, I hoped Jake's suspicions would turn out to be false. I pacified Lisa and promised her I would talk to Jake and knock some sense into him. I actually thought of meeting Jake that weekend and asking him to focus on his career instead of trying to expose Lisa. The next day, I got a call from Mr. Johnson, Lisa's father. I was taken aback when he said I should pull Jake's strings as he was harassing her at her workplace. I was speechless for a moment, wondering how he knew about the situation. Hesitantly, I asked if Lisa had told him anything. He said he was near Lisa's office that afternoon, so they decided to have lunch together. During lunch, Lisa poured her heart out about how Jake was spying on her. I don't know if it's just me or if Lisa was blowing up the situation out of proportion. I assured him I would take care of it. When Lisa returned home, I told her about her father's phone call. She admitted discussing her problem with her father. As usual, I told her it was our internal matter and we could have solved it ourselves. I had promised her last night that I would sort things out with Jake. Nevertheless, she turned defensive, stating it was her father and she had all the right to discuss her problems with him. A little backstory about Mr. Johnson. He's an overprotective father who would pull out a gun if anyone stared at his daughter. He leaves no opportunity to boast about how proud he is to be the father of an independent girl. I understand being protective and proud, but trust me guys, he's way over the top. So anyway, I called up Jake that very moment and asked him for a meeting in the upcoming week. The remaining days of the week were quiet. The following weekend, I went to meet Jake to ask him to stop his investigation. But he had something else in store for me. I started by thanking him for being so protective of me, and as I went on to ask him to curb it down, he stopped me and said he wanted to show me something. He pulled out his laptop and showed me a clip that sent shivers down my spine. It was a long video, and Jake fast-forwarded it to a point I was looking for. Lisa was seen with her boss in an elevator. He was caressing her hands while taking some files. Then he was seen fondling other parts of her body. I can't even type this without feeling sick. There were several clips where her boss's hands were all over her in the elevator and the deserted fire exit staircases. I didn't have the courage to watch all the clips with my eyes wide open. I told Jake to transfer all those files to me. I also asked him how he was able to get CCTV footage of the workspace since it was not accessible by an employee. He said he couldn't name names but had friends in the engineering department who were able to hack into the CCTV cameras in the deserted areas of the office. When I returned home, Lisa immediately asked if I had knocked some sense into my stupid nephew. I replied, "Yes, I have told Jake not to interfere in your business when you're getting knocked down by your boss." My voice automatically pitched high as I said that. She was flustered and tried to play the victim, saying Jake was filled with hatred for her. I yelled back, cutting off her drama, and said I had live proof of her boss playing with her body. She didn't back off until I showed her the clips. She was frozen for a moment before returning to her narcissistic self, threatening Jake for intruding on employees' personal space and threatening the security department for leaking CCTV footage. I couldn't place my finger on her reasoning. She claimed it was forged and asked me to verify the evidence before tarnishing her reputation. I told her bluntly that I had all the evidence of her going to hotel rooms with her boss. I said I had hired a private investigator who gave me all the information. I was bluffing because Jake had given me details of the hotel where Lisa and her boss frequently lodged for their dirty business. Although I didn't have any other information besides the hotel's name, I just played bluff and told her I knew all the details about her and her boss lodging at XYZ Hotel. She bought my bluff and was lost for words. She sat down and said I needed to hear her out before making any conclusions. I said I was all ears. She said, "Well, you know I'm in the advertising industry. It's part of the business, right? I need to keep my boss happy. There's nothing personal between us. It's just for work, you know." I felt my guts spill out from my mouth. How conveniently did she say it was nothing personal and all for work? Really? I know I'm going to piss off many of you by saying this, but if that's the case, her profession is no less than someone who sells their body for money. I can't believe she was putting up this whole woman empowerment act, claiming to thrive in a man's world with her head held high. No, not with her head held high, but with her knees bent down. I told her I wouldn't buy her logic, which was pure cheating. I made it clear that cheating was the end for me, and I would be filing for divorce. Saying that, I locked myself in the room, packed up some stuff, and left the house. While I was leaving, I told her she could vacate my house as soon as possible and that we would next meet in court. She didn't say anything. I lodged in a hotel for the night and took the next day's flight to Florida. I'll be honest, I wanted to run away from my miserable life. I called up my lawyer friend that very night and explained the situation. He took all the details from me and said he would send the divorce papers in a week to her residential address, her parents' house. Now I want to get the divorce done as soon as possible. I also know it's not going to be easy. I don't know how I'll survive, if at all I will. I can't believe she actually said, "I need to keep my boss happy." How dare she try to blame Jake for making her life miserable at work? She did that to herself. People are dumb. They see things. It's clearly cheating. It has nothing to do with business. Additionally, it sucks that Jake had to be the middle person and risk his job for me. Sounds like I have a great nephew, but a terrible wife. I'm sorry, Opie. Update 3. Thanks for all the support, people. So I was still in Florida when my lawyer sent the divorce papers to Lisa at her parents' house. A few hours after I got confirmation from the lawyer that the papers had been shipped, I got a call from Mr. Johnson, Lisa's father. He immediately started yelling at me, accusing me and Jake of being chauvinists and egotistical. He said I was divorcing Lisa because Jake and I couldn't stand her successful career. I was perplexed by his allegations. After he was done accusing me, I asked if he really knew the exact reason, but it was definitely not what he thought. I told him I didn't know what Lisa had told him, but I had all the proof for my claims, which I shared with him at that very instant while we were on the call. I asked him to check his phone. He was just silent. The first part of the silence was when he was checking the videos I sent, and the next part was due to embarrassment. I told him I was sorry he had to see such clips of his daughter, but I had no choice but to share them. I'm no saint. I can't just keep mum and take all the blame on myself when I'm the last one to be blamed for her actions. I'm the dang victim here. That was it from his end. I came back after a month or so, and Lisa had left the house by then. However, she was contesting the divorce, asking for alimony and a share in the house. My lawyer pressed her with alimony to compensate for the mental trauma I had to undergo because of her. He also assured me that our marriage was short-lived and she had no contribution during the purchase of the house, so she couldn't claim any share in it. The case is still on, but I guess I've moved on a little from where I was a couple of months ago when this all came out. I'm not seeing anyone, nor do I plan to anytime soon. I'm just focusing on getting rid of my drinking habit, which I picked up during my depression phase in Florida. Thanks for bearing with me.